When the god of the north, Andrius, concluded the Archon War by sacrificing his physical form to protect the region of Mondstadt, he put in strict rules for his descendants to follow. The wolves of Wolvendom are discouraged from being involved with the dealings of man. Andrius viewed humanity as a disappointment and did not wish his kin to be embroiled in their problems and politics. So while the wolves have largely steered clear of Mondstadt citizens, there is an exception to this rule, an abandoned child which Andrius took pity upon and decided his wolf pack should care for. And this is how Razer's story begins. What you might not know is that Razer's past, as mysterious as they are, might have caused him to be involved with the Abyss Order. Before we get into that though, if you want to see more Genshin Impact content, do consider subscribing to the channel. For a long time, we did not know who Razer's parents were or why he was abandoned. This invited a lot of theories about him, ranging from Razer being the son of Andrius to him just being some lost child. But because of the recent Y Laser Fest, we now know that Razer did indeed come from human parents. Both his parents were adventurous, and while it wasn't revealed what had happened to them, we do know that they cared for Razer very much. It's safe to assume that they likely died while adventuring, which left Razer as an orphan. How he ended up in Wolvendom is a complete mystery as well, but we do know that Andrius decided to take him in and raise him. As I mentioned in the intro, Andrius views humans as a disappointment, but he could not blame Razer for any misdoing since he was still an innocent child and so decided to take him in. Razer was then mostly raised by his wolfpack and hunted, slept, and grew up with them all the way into his teens. Because Andrius forbade much interaction between the wolves and the humans, the two parties largely did not cross paths. Most wolves steered clear of Mondstadt, while most Mondstadt citizens were just too afraid of even approaching Wolvendom based on the stories they heard about the wolves. So for a long time, Razer had little to no contact with any humans. He just thought he was some kind of hairless wolf. Now while Wolvendom has a reputation for being a somewhat scary place, there are a few who dare venture here. One day, an unnamed adventurer came into the area and met Razer. He was a giant of a man brandishing a claymore just as big as he was, and after meeting Razer, invited him to stay in Mondstadt. At this point, Razer wasn't familiar with human speech and did not respond. The wolves were also very wary of the stranger and tried to protect Razer. Eventually though, the situation diffused, and after several more visits, Razer felt less guarded around the stranger. Now one thing you should know is that for all this time, Razer simply had no name. It was this unnamed adventurer, who we found out is Varka himself, that gave Razer his name. Because we know that Razer was a name actually chosen by his parents, it's either sheer coincidence that Varka would grant him this name, or for this whole time Varka actually knew who Razer was and for some reason just allowed him to grow up as a feral wolf boy. Suffice to say, Varka has quite a lot to answer for. In any case, Varka taught Razer the art of using weapons, namely his claymore. He did this mostly so that Razer could protect his wolf pack, and after seeing he could not convince him to join him in Mondstadt, Varka left. After this, Varka would continue to keep an eye on Razer. I somewhat suspect that Varka knew Razer's parents personally and had spent all this time after their death looking for their missing son, and when he eventually found him, did all he could for the young man. Varka is also likely the person who introduced Razer to Lisa and had her act as his teacher. Lisa taught Razer a bunch of important skills, from how to cook food to human language, but arguably her most important lessons involved the use of his vision. Now I'll get to how Razer gets his vision in a bit, but when he received it, he wasn't a proficient user of it. In fact, because he could not control it very well, Razer tended to release either small amounts of electro energy or huge blasts of it with no in-between. It was extremely dangerous not only for his foes, but his allies and Lupercal family as well. So Lisa's tutelage here was extremely important, as it allowed him to utilize this gift while at the same time not hurt his friends and family. Now the story of how he got his vision is rather interesting. During a rather fierce lightning storm, for some reason an Abyss Mage ambushed Razer specifically and tried to drag him away. As his wolfpack came to his defense, they each fell to the Abyss Mage. Seeing this, and in a burst of emotion, Razer let out a howl, and alongside this, lightning began raining from the skies. Because he was inexperienced and overcome with emotion, the burst of electro energy were sufficiently strong to completely overwhelm the Abyss Mage. He likely obtained his vision as a result of a strong desire to protect his family after he saw what had happened to them. What's interesting about this story isn't how Razer got his vision, but rather, why in the world would an Abyss Mage go out of his way to Wolvendom just to kidnap Razer? This is the part that ties back to the intro I mentioned. Based on what I've said so far, it doesn't seem like Razer is any more important than a common Mondstadt citizen. Plus, he was pretty much secluded in Wolvendom, so it doesn't make much sense for any one party to target him, let alone the Abyss Order. I have a couple of thoughts on this, and the most sane one is the idea that the Abyss Order wanted to use Andrius in a similar way to how they used the Valen. They likely assumed that they could convince the god to do their bidding by holding Razer hostage. Perhaps the Abyss were looking for a way to force Andrius and have him betray or attack Mondstadt. After all, we do know that their goal at the time was to destroy Mondstadt. The other possibility is that the attack was related to Varka. Being the Grandmaster of the Favonius Knights and the Knight of Boreal, it is not surprising if the Abyss Order were keeping tabs on him. Perhaps they saw he had a connection to this child and wanted to use that against him. I mean, with one of Mondstadt's more powerful combatants out of the way, destroying Mondstadt would be that much easier. Now the final theory is the least likely, and it has to do with his parents. This is the theory that may tie him to the Abyss Order. We know that his parents were adventurous, and they both likely knew Varka personally, so perhaps they were very experienced and strong people. It could be possible that they were in an operation or commission that went against the Abyss Order and caused them a lot of problems. Perhaps during such an operation, they unfortunately met their demise and caused Razer to be teleported somewhere else, like what happened to Dainsleif when he entered one of their portals. It would also explain why Varka would take an interest in Razer and why the Abyss also tried to kidnap him, possibly for revenge. However, since we don't know much about his parents or the type of adventurers they were, it's a pretty outlandish guess. In any case, a lot of these are really just guesses anyways. Maybe there wasn't any complicated reason behind the Abyss Mage's actions, and maybe they just wanted to kidnap a slave or an experimental subject. Whatever the case may be, it ultimately led to Razer obtaining his vision and yet another way to protect his family. Perhaps in the future we will learn more about his parents once Varka returns to the story, but for now, that does it for this video. If you enjoyed it, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As always, have a good day.